When my mom finally reached out after 15 years of pretending I didn't exist, she didn't ask how I was doing.
She didn't ask where I lived or if I was even happy.
She just asked what my blood type was.
I was 17 when she walked out of my life.
Not literally, of course.
She didn't pack a bag in the middle of the night and vanish into the wind.
Her abandonment was way more refined than that. She married a guy who didn't want the baggage of a messy past, and she agreed I was exactly that.
Baggage. His name was Richard.
He was a wealth management partner obsessed with country clubs and perfect lawns.
He had a zero-tolerance policy for anything complicated, and I was definitely complicated. I was the living reminder of her first marriage.
The one that left us with nothing but debt and bad memories.
So when they bought their massive 5-bedroom house in a gated community, my mom sat me down. Right at the kitchen table of our cramped apartment, she told me I was staying behind. She actually framed it as a favor to everyone. She claimed my grandma needed help and that I needed stability for my senior year. But I saw Richard waiting in the idling car outside, and I saw the relief in her eyes when I didn't cry or beg. She promised to call and swore we'd do dinner every Sunday.
The first month, we had exactly one dinner. The second month, I got a brief phone call.
After that, she just kind of faded out. By the time I graduated high school, she didn't even show up to watch me walk the stage. She just sent a generic card with a $50 bill. The note inside said she was feeling under the weather. A year later, she had my half-sister, Clara. I didn't get a phone call about it. I actually found out through a distant cousin's Facebook post. It was pretty surreal. There was my mom, glowing in a private hospital suite, holding a baby in a monogrammed blanket. Richard was beaming right beside her. They looked like a magazine cover. And in that picture, there was absolutely no trace of me. For 15 years, that was just my reality. I put myself through college working brutal night shifts at a diner. I took out loans that literally kept me awake in cold sweats. I didn't have a safety net, so I built a graphic design career from the ground up. I saved every penny I could and finally bought my own small condo. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine.
I had to learn how to fix a leaky sink with a wrench and a YouTube video.
I navigated bad breakups without a shoulder to cry on. I even figured out how to survive the flu without anyone bringing me soup. I did all the growing up a mother is supposed to guide you through, completely alone. Over those 15 years, her silence wasn't just an absence. It was an active, deliberate choice she made every single day. Every holiday, every birthday, she woke up and chose not to call. Instead, she poured every ounce of her maternal energy into Clara. Clara got the private schools, the writing lessons, the perfect life. Clara even got a sweet 16 that looked like a royal wedding. Meanwhile, I got a life built entirely on my own grit. But eventually, I reached a place where the rejection didn't hurt anymore. The wound had finally scarred over. I stopped looking for her face in crowds, and I stopped wondering if she was proud of me. I just accepted that I was an orphan with a living mother. And then, on a totally unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was instantly familiar. My stomach just dropped. I answered it, and there was this long, heavy pause. Then she said, "It's Mom." The word felt so foreign, like a stone in my shoe. I hadn't used that word in over a decade. I sat there staring at my computer screen, my hands literally shaking. A cold rush of adrenaline just flooded my system. I didn't ask how she was. I just asked what she wanted.
Her voice trembled through the speaker.
It was a delicate, fragile sound, but I instantly recognized the performance. She was trying to sound sad, but it felt super fake. She said it was an emergency and asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see her. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Or maybe some unhealed part of my inner child wanted to see if she finally realized what she threw away. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. We met at this sterile, overly bright cafe halfway between our worlds. I got there early and sat at a cold marble table. The harsh lights eliminated any cozy shadows. The tense vibe perfectly mirrored the awkward reunion about to happen. When she walked in, I noticed she looked older, tired, and uncharacteristically fragile. But she hadn't come alone. Right beside her was Clara, the golden child. She was 20 now, a striking, polished replica of my mother. They sat across from me, a united front of luxury and entitlement. Clara was dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my first car. The contrast between my gritty reality and their pristine world had never been more obvious. My mother didn't waste time pretending to care about my life. She didn't ask how I survived the last 15 years alone. She just folded her trembling hands on the table, her expensive rings catching the harsh light. She looked me dead in the eye. Her rehearsed sorrow slipped into genuine desperation as she delivered the news. She was in end-stage renal failure. Her kidneys were shutting down. She needed a transplant to survive. I sat there, absorbing the heavy information. I felt a brief flicker of human empathy, like reading a sad news article about a stranger. But I didn't feel crushing devastation. Instead, I just felt a deep, creeping suspicion. I kept my voice perfectly level, refusing to give them the emotional reaction they wanted. I told her I was sorry to hear that. Then I asked what her doctor said about the waiting list. The question hung in the air. My mother didn't answer immediately. Instead, she exchanged a loaded, panicked glance with Clara. It was Clara who spoke next, leaning forward with the sharp impatience and confidence of someone who always gets what they want. Clara didn't miss a beat. She said the waiting list was years long, her voice sharp and impatient. Our mother didn't have years to wait. She needed a living donor, and family was the best match. The silence that followed was suffocating. I just stared at my mother, waiting for her to actually say it out loud. She reached across the table, trying to touch my hand, but I pulled it back. She whispered my name, tears finally spilling over her carefully applied makeup. She told me I was her daughter, that she brought me into this world, and she needed me to get tested to save her life. The sheer audacity hit me like a physical blow. For 15 years, I wasn't her daughter. I was a secret she kept buried to play the perfect society wife. But now, suddenly, I was family again. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my coffee in her face, even though every instinct told me to. I just stood up, threw a $10 bill on the table, and told her I'd think about it. That was my first mistake. I should have walked out and blocked her number right then and there. By giving her a sliver of hope, I opened the floodgates to a level of psychological warfare I wasn't prepared for. Over the next 2 weeks, my phone did not stop ringing. It was relentless. They were invading the quiet, peaceful life I had built for myself, and I couldn't escape it. Richard, the man who banished me from my own mother's life, suddenly found my email address. He sent me these long, manipulative messages about forgiveness and how family puts the past behind them in a crisis. He didn't offer a single apology for the last 15 years, not one. He just offered demands, framing them as moral obligations. He told me I'd never be able to live with myself if I let her die.
Then came the messages from extended family.
Aunts and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years crawled out of the woodwork. They called me selfish for hesitating. They said I was holding a bitter grudge over childish things. Childish things.
That's what they called being abandoned at 17.
They completely minimized the trauma of being left behind. They acted like I was just holding some petty grudge. Despite the anger, a toxic little seed of guilt started sprouting in my chest. Society conditions us to revere the title of mother. The world tells you that you owe them simply because they gave you life.
I was completely drowning in that messaging.
I wasn't sleeping at all.
I was totally distracted at work, just staring at my screen. The pressure from every side was suffocating me. Part of me, that deeply traumatized part I thought I'd healed, started whispering to me. It told me that maybe if I did this, maybe if I literally gave her a piece of my body, things would change. I started wondering if she'd finally look at me the way she looked at Clara.
She'd have to love me then, right?
Driven by pure exhaustion and this lingering, pathetic hope, I finally caved.
I agreed to do the initial blood work and compatibility testing. I made it very clear that I wasn't committing to the surgery itself. I only agreed to see if I was a match. My mother and Richard were absolutely ecstatic when they heard the news. They acted like everything was suddenly fixed between us. To celebrate my compliance, they sent a massive arrangement to my apartment. They sent me flowers. 15 years of birthdays completely ignored. But the moment I offered up my organs, I got a bouquet of white lilies. The hypocrisy of it literally made my stomach turn. I went to the transplant clinic at the major research hospital downtown. The building was massive and intimidating. It was a stark reminder of the reality of what I was actually doing. The clinic was freezing and smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. I went through hours of grueling tests and endless blood draws. The staff was incredibly kind, which somehow made it all worse. Everyone at the clinic kept looking at me with these soft, admiring eyes. They kept calling me a hero for stepping up to save her. But honestly, it just made me sick to my stomach. I didn't feel like a hero at all. I felt like a hostage. A week later, they called me back in to go over the preliminary results. I sat across from the transplant coordinator, this really warm woman named Sarah. I was just clutching my purse in my lap, feeling my heart absolutely pounding against my ribs. Sarah pulled out this massive, thick medical folder and started flipping through the pages. She looked up at me and offered this gentle, reassuring smile. She had no idea she was about to hand me a life sentence. She told me the good news was that I was perfectly healthy, and even better, I was a strong, viable match for my mother. I literally felt all the air leave my lungs. A match. The trap was officially springing shut. But then Sarah kept talking, trying to be comforting. And in doing so, she completely shattered my entire world. She said she knew this was super stressful for the family, especially after the disappointment with my sister. She smiled and told me it was really beautiful that I was stepping up to do this when Clara couldn't. I just froze. The blood drained from my face so fast, I actually felt dizzy. I stared at her, totally unable to process what she just said. I asked her what she meant, my voice barely a whisper. When Clara can't. Sarah looked up and this brief flash of confusion crossed her face. She hesitated, clearly realizing she'd just stepped right into a massive family landmine.
But she couldn't exactly lie to me now. She stammered a bit, saying she assumed I already knew.
Then she explained that Clara had actually been tested months ago, and Clara was a perfect, identical match.
My hands started shaking.
I forced the words out through a throat that felt like it was completely closing up. I asked her if Clara was a perfect match, why wasn't she the donor?
Sarah looked incredibly uncomfortable.
She quietly explained that Clara withdrew from the donor program. It wasn't a medical disqualification at all. The family just decided not to proceed with her for personal reasons.
Personal reasons. I didn't need her to explain what that meant.
Personal reasons. I didn't need Sarah to explain what those personal reasons were. The truth hit me with the force of a freight train. Clara wasn't sick.
Clara wasn't medically ineligible.
Clara was a perfect match. But Clara was the golden child. Clara was the daughter my mother actually loved. Clara was young, beautiful, and heading into her senior year of college. A major surgery would mean a long recovery. It would mean a scar on her perfect stomach. It would mean disrupting the pristine, beautiful life my mother and Richard had built for her. They didn't want Clara to suffer the pain, the risk, or the inconvenience of donating an organ. So they looked around for an alternative. They looked for someone whose pain didn't matter to them. They looked for someone whose life was considered expendable. They looked for me. I wasn't being asked to save my mother's life because I was her last hope. I was being asked to step in so her real daughter wouldn't have to be inconvenienced.
I was spare parts.
I didn't cry. For the first time since my mother reappeared in my life, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt, sadness, or inner child longing. I felt absolute, crystal clear rage. And beneath that rage was a profound, liberating sense of peace. Because in that moment, the final thread tying me to the illusion of a mother was severed. I thanked Sarah for her time, walked out of the clinic, and drove straight to Richard and my mother's house. I didn't call ahead. I just pulled up to the gated community, waited for a delivery truck to punch in the code, and followed it inside. I parked in their pristine circular driveway. I walked up to the massive oak front door and rang the bell. It was Richard who answered. When he saw me, his face broke into a relieved, patronizing smile. Richard practically dragged me inside, asking if I had the results. I stepped into their massive foyer. It was lined with framed portraits of their perfect little family. Richard, my mother, and Clara. Not a single trace of me. I walked straight past him into the living room. My mother was resting on her velvet sofa, playing the fragile victim. Clara was lounging in an armchair, scrolling on her phone. It was the exact same picture of wealth and entitlement I remembered. They both looked up when I walked in. Their faces shifted from surprise to this pathetic, hopeful anticipation. My mother sat up, breathing my name like I was her savior. She asked what the doctors had said. I just stood there in the center of their perfect living room. I looked at the three of them. I took a slow, deep breath. I let the silence stretch out. I let the tension build until it was absolutely suffocating. Finally, I told them I spoke to the coordinator. I kept my voice completely steady, hard as stone. And then I delivered the news. I told them I was a match. My mother let out this loud, dramatic sob of relief. Richard actually clapped his hands together. And Clara? Clara just smiled. She looked genuinely thrilled that she was officially off the hook. But I didn't smile back. I just kept my eyes locked, dead on my mother. I told them I also found out something else.
I let those words hang in the air,
Cutting through their little celebration like a knife.
I looked right at her, and I told them I found out that Clara is a perfect match.
Not just a match.
A better match than me.
The reaction was instantaneous.
All that relief just vanished, replaced by a terrified, suffocating silence. Richard's jaw tightened up. Clara stared at her lap, suddenly unable to meet my gaze, and my mother's face went completely pale. Richard tried to step in. He used that same stern voice he used to intimidate me when I was 17.
He told me to let him explain.
But I wasn't 17 anymore. I told him to shut up. I didn't yell. I just spoke with an authority that made him instantly close his mouth. I turned back to the woman who actually gave birth to me. I told her she didn't call me because she was out of options. I kept my voice completely eerily calm. I told her the real reason she reached out. It was because she didn't want her real daughter to have a scar. She didn't want her precious golden child to miss a single semester of college. She didn't want Clara to experience even an ounce of discomfort. So she made a different plan. She decided to just harvest the daughter she threw away 15 years ago. My mother actually cried out that it wasn't fair. Her voice cracked in this pathetic, desperate way, like she was the victim in all of this. She pleaded that Clara was just so young, that she had her whole entire life ahead of her. She claimed the surgery was dangerous, and she just couldn't bear the thought of putting her baby at risk. I just looked at her. I let the absolute cruelty of her own words settle over the entire room. And then I asked her, what about me? I asked if I wasn't someone's baby too. I asked if I didn't have a life ahead of me. Did my life just not count? She had absolutely no answer. She just sat there weeping, completely stripped of all her excuses. Her manipulation was gone. She looked exactly like what she was. A profoundly selfish woman who had finally been caught. I looked around that perfect room one last time. I told her she spent 15 years pretending I didn't even exist, and that she made her choice a long, long time ago. She chose this family, and now this family was going to have to save her. 'Cause I was not a part of it. I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. As I walked down that pristine driveway to my car, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I knew exactly who it was. They were already trying to do damage control. I pulled it out and just stared at the screen. It was Richard, probably typing out another lecture, but I was completely done listening. I didn't hesitate for a single second. I blocked Richard's number. I blocked Clara's number. And finally, I blocked my mother's number. Just like that, the connection was severed. The drive home felt completely different. The air in my car actually felt lighter, like a physical weight had been lifted off my chest. It was like I could finally breathe again. For 15 years, I carried the invisible weight of her rejection. I spent so much time wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why I wasn't enough to be kept. But the truth had nothing to do with my worth. As I pulled into my own driveway, I looked at the modest place I bought myself. I was returning to the quiet, peaceful life I built with my own two hands. And in that moment, I finally understood. I was never the problem. I never had been. Some people are just incapable of loving anyone, beyond what they can use them for. I didn't owe her my forgiveness, no matter what society says about mothers. And I certainly didn't owe her my life.
I owed myself the peace she tried to steal from me.
She made her choice a long time ago.
When she left me behind. But this time, I was making a choice for me.
I was the one walking away for good.
And I'm never looking back.